We have a predicament, Caroline.
What is it?
They have not announced more episodes. So does
Yeah.
this episode count as an episode, or are we doing a special edition right now?
Bonus
Bonus
content.
episode. Okay, so I won't call this is not episode 8 or 7 or whatever it is. It's not numbered. This is just the Corkboard Chronicle, as I hope you all know, where we discuss the documentary what just came out a week ago today, the night we're recording this, SNL 50 Beyond Saturday Night, a 4-episode event. So, Caroline, how's it going? Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you so soon after
I
our
know.
very long break for the
It's I feel
holidays.
like yeah, we've had only really long breaks and now I'm just like, hey, we got content, content, content. This is the reason we're all here, the big 50th.
Yep.
Um, take me through the experience of watching this new Peacock documentary series.
Let me think. I think I watched it on Saturday,
Okay, good day for it.
fully like midday,
Yeah,
just in the daylight, which is not how I usually watch SNL. It
right.
was a little jarring to see sunlight,
Uh huh.
but I don't know, I had a great time. I sat down, I watched all of it in one sitting.
Straight down. You know what's
Yeah.
so funny, and I am skipping around. We're going to go in order eventually, but there is something that I guess I did text you about it, but it was so funny because in episode 4, which is all about season 11, Robert Downey Jr. shows up in a Gator shirt,
Go
and so I
Gators.
text everyone I've ever met, including our mutual friend of the show, Blake Trosky, and she goes, "Did Caroline send you that picture?" And I'm like, "No, I do my own research." And she said, because she just sent me the same thing, or several days ago.
hmm
And so yeah, I like that detail really stuck out to both of us.
I
Um,
immediately paused my TV and pulled my phone out to take a picture to send
yeah,
to Blake. I was like,
like
oh my God.
wait, well, it is. I don't know the lore behind that. I don't know where he got this shirt. I never see Florida merch anywhere, you know?
No, I dug around his Wikipedia to see if I could find anyone that he was like connected to that went there, and I
Yeah.
came up short. So
Right.
I think he must have just found it somewhere.
Thrifted it somehow. I mean, I don't
Wanted a
know.
bright orange shirt.
And he got it, but yeah, go
He sure
Gators.
did.
The only other time I've seen like Florida mentioned in like media like that, there was so on Late Night with Conan O'Brien, which I think we talked about. You're just now getting
I'm
into like the Conan
just now,
O'Brien
yeah,
lore.
yeah.
um, Mark Twain Prize Award. Is it? He's not necessarily a nominee. He is getting it, but doesn't have it yet.
Right.
Recipient.
Yes,
Oscars host. You got a lot of catching up to. There's a whole
I know.
career to look through, but they did this sketch after Florida won the NCAA tournament in basketball, one of those years, maybe the second year. And they used to do this bit where he was going through pictures from the party he just went to last night, with the premise being like, hey, I got really drunk, I'm gonna have to look through all these and just remember what I did, um, and uh, and he is wearing a Florida hat in it because they all came dressed in like the merch of who they thought was gonna win.
hmm
And so that was kind of fun. It was like, oh my God, it's a go Gators! And so there is a picture of Conan in a Gator hat, and now Robert Downey Jr. in a Gator T-shirt. Um, that honestly, like, if I'm never going to host SNL, just rest assured that already wasn't ever going to happen, and now I'm doing this show, so I'm definitely locked out for the rest of my life. But it was always like, oh my God, if I get there, I hope I go in the fall, and I hope it's after like a really good Gator game so that I can shout them out.
hmm
Because like growing up, I'm like, nobody's from here, nobody's from this region.
Yeah.
And then Nate Bargatze this year, after
hmm
Vanderbilt beat Alabama, shouted them out, and I was like, see, that's the dream.
Yeah.
Represent from your underrepresented hometown. So yeah, the fact that like, as it turns out, the Gators have been on SNL was like, oh, awesome. That was really fun.
The bonus thing you didn't think you were gonna get from the documentary.
Right, because like, how would that have ever
Right.
come up? Like I thought all these people were from Harvard for the past 48 years. Um, so yeah, that was really fun. But Caroline, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Episode one. Episode one is all about the writing of. I'm sorry, no, that's not true. Episode one is about the auditions and the
Mhm.
audition process. I know you were struck immediately, like minute one of this
Yeah.
documentary.
Yeah. I have this thing now where every time I see Tracy Morgan, I just immediately cry
Expand
because
on that.
yeah, I mean, he had that accident and
Yeah,
then I just every time I see him, I'm like, oh my God, we're so lucky he's still alive. Like,
right.
thank God Tracy's here.
Oh
You
yeah.
know how I feel about 30 Rock. He's a deeply important person to me
Yeah,
in that
absolutely.
context.
Yep.
So, especially, and it always makes me think of when he hosted SNL for the first time after his accident, which was
Mhm.
also very emotional.
Yeah.
So it just all kind of boils to the top every time I see him on screen.
Yeah.
And so yeah, right away it opens on Tracy and I get a little weepy and that really didn't go away.
Right.
So
He was very much. I mean, he got a little teary. They played that clip
yeah.
towards the end, but like, man, the amount that he has been through, and he said it maybe towards the beginning or maybe towards the end, like he was not necessarily pursuing this
Mhm.
actively, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden, like his life is very, very different just because of that one audition, and
Yeah.
that's probably why they chose to kind of, like you said, center this whole episode really around him. I
Mhm.
think the he's had the most uh he's had like the craziest trajectory, the most tragic, not well,
Mhm.
the most tragic trajectories of those who are still around.
Yeah.
um and so going back to that moment where it all began for all of them was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. um No, I thought, here's one thing that I wanted to discuss. Maybe my biggest like eye opener of the episode was the fact that like we see so many of these people's audition clips. A lot of them happened one to blank number of years before they actually joined the cast.
Mhm.
That was something I hoped they would cover a little more, and I thought they were going to.
Yeah.
Lindsay Shookus starts talking about how, like, Andy Samberg auditioned twice and someone else auditioned twice, which made me think, okay, now we're going to start talking about like people that it took a couple of attempts,
Mhm.
but I can't tell if what she was actually talking about was the idea of a two-pronged audition process that we've heard so much about.
Right. I feel like usually you hear that they go in for an audition and then maybe a month later, a few weeks later, they go
Hmm.
in for a second round. But there were a lot of people that it was clear there would be maybe a full year between
Hmm.
their auditions. And yeah, they
Right.
didn't really touch on that, which I kind of wish they had because that's not the typical audition story that we hear.
For sure. Yeah, like because we hear the whole, like, they called me back in 3 weeks and said or they called
Mm-hmm.
me back the next day and said I couldn't do anything I did the day before. Um, that's like a pretty familiar storyline for
Yeah.
the auditions, but yeah, it was unclear whether she meant that, which to me is considered a callback, not a second, not
Right. Right.
necessarily like a second attempt. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas some of these people, and one that really stood out to me was when they showed a quick clip of Melissa Villaseñor's audition, which should have been just like, no, it's part of a montage, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They dated that, and if this is accurate, it's insane. They dated it July of 2009. She did not join the cast until 2016. So obviously that was not
Yeah.
her final time auditioning. And again,
Right.
date is correct, that means that instead of Melissa Villaseñor, the show hired Jenny Slate. Like, that's the timeline we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, I
Um,
guess I don't see a world where both of them come onto the show at the same time
oh,
at
for sure.
in 2009, you
Yeah.
know.
It's just the fact that, like, we get Jenny Slate on the show, and it very well could have been, for, who knows why they didn't end up picking her, but it very well could have been Melissa Villaseñor.
Yeah.
And what struck me about that is because I used to watch America's Got Talent growing up. I I am okay to admit that. I'm not entirely ashamed, because that show is so different than what it
Yes.
was in the early 2010s. Like,
Yeah.
I even went back and watched like an episode of it um a couple of years ago. Like, I was like, what does this look like with fresh eyes? And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, this show is much better when they're not like blatantly, you know, uh, jockeying for like Facebook likes. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know who coined this. I don't think I was the first person to say it, but inspiration porn.
Yeah, that
When
is
they
yeah.
when they pivoted to that, it got really hard to watch. But when it was actually like a great talent competition, a live broadcasting triumph for
Mhm.
that much variety, especially when they get to
Yeah.
the end, quarterfinals and all that. It was a great show, and Melissa Villaseñor, was on season, I want to say 6 or maybe 5. It was 2011, and,
Okay.
and she did impressions. She would do like a minute and a half of impressions. That was her act every time, and it was fantastic. So when she got hired in 2016, I was like, whoa, how did someone go? Because these people do America's Got Talent, you don't really hear from them again.
No.
And
No.
so I'm like, what was she doing in those
Where was
five
she for
years?
5 years?
Yeah, in the interim, where like I didn't know what happened to Melissa Villaseñor, and
Yeah.
now she's in the cast at SNL, and so to know that she was on their radar, on SNL's radar, even before she hit America's Got Talent, it was like between that and the whole like 2009 Jenny Slate thing was like a double
Mhm.
time warp in my mind, where it's like, okay, if there's an episode 5 to this documentary, I need it to be about her.
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to know more. Um, Melissa Villaseñor, if this episode makes it to your algorithm, open invitation. I'll send you the link. We're going to talk about this. I actually did get to see her perform stand-up in 2019,
Oh
I want to
wow.
say. Yeah, it was like a very small venue. I'm talking like 3 rows of seats.
Mhm.
And she was fantastic. Had a blast. But yeah, that blew my mind. For sure. And that was probably, even though it was like this small of a moment, I just had to pause and stare. And it
Yeah.
was like the standout for me personally. I don't know if you had a moment like that where you were just like, whoa.
I don't know if I did. I don't know if anything really like caught me super off guard.
Uh-huh.
I'll have to think about that as I recall it. It has been 5 days since I watched it, so
Right. That's true. It's a little more fresh for me. I didn't get to see it till like I started it Monday and then watched it Tuesday and Wednesday.
Mhm.
I'm not a binge watcher. I don't know where people find the time. I mean, on the weekend, don't get me wrong, I do
Yeah.
it. But like during the week, I'm like, one episode, all right, it's 10 p.m. I gotta go to bed.
Right.
So are you okay after seeing the clip of Henry Zabrowski? Are we all okay after that?
How has that gone around before? Like,
I
is
mean,
that common, like a common story that I should know? Because I feel like I should know that that happened.
I have never heard it in my life. In my
They
life.
really, yeah, kept it under wraps this whole time.
And so, there's a very good possibility. I started reading this not long ago, the classic, and James Andrew Miller. So yeah, James Andrew Miller was interviewed in the season
Mm.
11 documentary. I don't know if we see. You know what? Let's live look this up in the index. We're gonna pretend it's 1960 right now, and I'm going to look up Zabrowski. Zuckerberg, interesting. He did make an appearance in 2010. I understand. Okay, nothing in Zabrowski, and then let's try. Oh yeah, these are organized by last name, so we will not find a Zabrowski in here. So it hasn't been written about or interviewed about
Yeah.
previously. And look, I'm not to toot our own horn. If we
Right.
haven't heard about
Yeah.
it, there's really such a good chance that no one's ever talked about it. But that seems like it should be instant lore.
Yeah, it should be one of those things that you just know about SNL if you're kind of, I guess, on our side of culture. Like you should
Right.
just kind of know that that happened. Like one time a guy did this in his audition.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't. And they've just been sitting on that footage for however long.
15 years,
Yeah.
yeah. So because I think they said that happened in 2010. I think that was like the font on the screen.
Okay.
Melissa Villasenor, that's another question for you. Did you know about this happening after you auditioned for the first time? Also, when was your first time auditioning? Was it 2009? Was it
Right.
earlier? We don't know. They didn't cover it. That was the only like gap of knowledge that I would have liked to explore, was seeing
Yeah.
people who it may have taken several attempts.
Mm-hmm.
And then this just occurred to me actually, the idea of Chris Parnell leaving and coming back. I don't fully know the story there. He
I
joined the
didn't.
cast in 1990, I want to say 8. In the summer of 2001, they cut him
Oh,
and then brought him back the 2002 season, I want to say,
okay.
in the middle of the following season. So by the calendar year 2003, he was back on the
Mm-hmm.
show and then stayed until Tina Fey left. That
Interesting.
with that whole group.
Yeah.
Um, things like that, where it's like, did they come back to him and say, "Hey, are you available?" Did he have to audition again? I think that would have been an interesting um, exploration. I don't know.
Yeah. He wasn't
Um,
in that episode, was he?
no, he was not.
He
He
was
was
in.
only
Okay.
interviewed
He was
for the cowbell,
cowbell episode. Okay.
right? Um, so yeah, Henry Zabrowski. I hope to God someone reached out to him. I feel like they wouldn't have put it up if he. And I looked him up. He's doing fine, completely
Yeah.
fine. He has a lot of film credits and a lot of TV credits. So he probably, I would imagine, was approached for it, was asked about it,
Yeah.
and said, "Hell yeah, that'd be really funny
I
to
guess
show people that."
I'm wondering how did they have to get permission from people to use their audition footage, or do you think that these people signed signed something that gave SNL the rights to all of that when they auditioned?
I am positive that they can put up whatever they want. Like
Any of their audition footage.
right. Like, I think the part of the agreement to go see the show in the audience is like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't sue us if you're on
Right.
TV. Like, that's the point of coming in here. It's like whether or not they sign something, it's like an assumed, not assumed,
Yeah.
but like, um, it's like an automatic waiving of
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of rights, because that footage does belong to them.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I was thinking about how and I might have noted this in future episodes, like, oh yeah, the cowbell sketch is when it really stuck out to me, because like up until that point we had seen alternate angles of the show, like the camera shots that weren't on
Yeah.
air. They were able to kind of edit those together. And then when you could actually hear stage manager Jenna Rossitano calling for the cast of Cowbell in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the show, I'm like, oh, they have everything. They have
Yeah.
every angle. They have every camera feed. They have stage managers' feeds. They probably have the director's feed for at least, I mean, that sketch was 25 years ago, at least 25 years
Yeah, I'm sure they
of the
have
show.
all of it. I'm sure there's some room somewhere. Maybe it's not, you know, actually like on site, but there's a
Hmm.
room somewhere with a bunch of really crazy hard drives, I think just like chock full of everything that's ever happened there.
Hmm. Wouldn't surprise me. And we've heard
Yeah.
about the database, or what do they call it? The
Mm-hmm.
archive.
Yeah.
They've talked about it a lot on the Lonely Island podcast. Questlove
Right.
is on a media blitz right now to promote the next SNL 50 documentary about music.
Mm-hmm.
He gained access to it. This is what he said on the Tonight Show, and I think on CBS This Morning, or CBS Mornings. Sorry. Um, that once he gained access to that database, he watched every episode of Saturday Night Live.
I would too. Yeah.
I would too,
I don't blame
absolutely.
him.
But
I know he
like,
was doing it for a reason, but I think I also would too.
I just would, right?
Do
I was
it?
kind of,
Yeah.
I was doing that up until my source was
Yeah.
decimated. I
Right.
was doing that to follow along with the Lonely Island podcast because I wanted to see,
Yeah.
the sketches they were talking about. Yeah, I can't blame him at all for doing that. It's just like, whoa, that's thorough
Yeah.
research for like uh, ultimately just about music. But what he said was like he had set out to do like the top 50 musical performances
Mm-hmm.
and like delineate those, and then he was like, this show music on this show is so much more than just the music performances. There are so
Yeah.
many musical sketches too. And
Yeah.
then that's when it kind of developed into that documentary. I have the slide here because I intended to talk about it much later. The 50 years of SNL music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that one's going to be a really, really interesting one. May I nerd out for a second?
Please.
Here's the issue, folks. You cannot find the music performances. You can. It is rare to see like an original airing in like a good quality, not cut down for Peacock. I'm talking like as aired.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, a live broadcast like SNL, like the news, like sports, comes at you in 60 frames per second. To me, that gives things like the look of it being live. Somehow, it's just more exciting when you're
Yeah.
capturing all of the motion that you can. And personally, I think it would be an incredible decision for SNL to start implementing that on their YouTube uploads. It's just a different vibe
Mm-hmm.
than like the more digital look of uploading in 30 frames per second. When they announced
Yeah.
this and they announced that it was going on NBC, not Peacock, I was like, oh, this might be an interesting opportunity to show like this archival footage as it was shot.
Right.
Um, is it going to take me out of it completely if it's in, let's say, 24 frames per second, just like just like the rest of the film part of that? Not necessarily. I will think it's kind of a missed opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
but is it going to ruin the experience? No, but I think people underestimate how that subtle look that some people may not even be able to define. I've tried to describe it to like my parents, for example, and they're just like, I don't see a difference. I'm like, there's a huge difference. Um, but there is something more true to life about it. Like
Yeah.
you the the casual, maybe younger viewer would actually be floored to see like footage from the 80s, footage from the 90s as it was actually broadcast. It looks better than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Because the kind of media that we're consuming from that time it has been like taped to like home VHS tapes, not professional VHS tapes. They're ancient. They haven't been preserved very well. They've been played a lot. All of that plays a factor in like degrading the tape. I truly think people would be floored at the look of some like media from that time if it's played from its source.
Yeah.
Um, so again, I don't know how it's going to look on the documentary. I would imagine, because as we've gone more digital, less reliant on tape, that it is probably all one uniform um, frame rate. So it's all probably going to be 24.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just something I always think about when it's like, you know, thinking about how they're going to cover this kind of thing in a live aspect. Again, it's definitely something only I think about for sure. Don't get me wrong. Um, but it has an effect on the look for sure.
Yeah.
So again, nothing really more to say about that. It's just like,
I guess we'll see.
yeah,
It would be
be on the
cool, but
yeah,
we'll
just
see.
like be on the lookout for it. If you're like, wow, this
Yeah.
looks really smooth, like the archival footage that they show, that's why. So let's go back to our regularly
Little
regularly
detour.
scheduled programming. Yeah, and we don't necessarily have to go in order either. If there's something you like think about that's
Right.
like, oh wait, I remember this thing, then that's totally fine. Talking about emotional moments, I think Bobby Moynihan's part was another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Um, he, I, I haven't kept up with him. He landed a couple shows. None of them are still on. So I
He's
don't
in a
know.
new show.
Oh, he is. Okay, good, good,
He
good.
plays a lab tech on the new NCIS prequel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, a
Haven't
different
watched it yet,
tone.
but yeah, he's in like a crime procedural right now.
Huh, how about that? Good for him. I just like it, but you can tell how much that show meant to him, and particularly
Yeah.
the part where Seth Meyers hired him, and he said, and Seth's message to him was, "Get ready to never talk about anything else for the rest of
Yeah.
your life." I'm like, yeah, that would be
Yeah.
me too. If I had anything to do with it, I'd be like, hey, do you know?
Right. It'd be how I would
What
start every conversation, how I
I know,
introduced myself,
right?
like
Want to
yeah.
ask me about John Mulaney? Like just
Right.
anything. Everybody that they interviewed, at least,
Yeah.
just has so much love for that show, while also acknowledging that they don't ever want to do it again.
Yeah.
You know, which makes sense. Um, I when I see clips like this, Heidi Gardner talking about like, um, you're always a part of SNL. Like it's just
Hmm.
this is you're kind of immortalized. A lot of people have talked about that. Um, I remember when they used to do these stories from the show. It was like a YouTube exclusive kind of
Hmm.
documentary thing that they were doing in the 45th season. They interviewed John Mulaney, and he closed it out with, once you work here, you always work here. They find a
Hmm.
way to get you coming back. And Luke Null, who had been fired the previous season, retweeted it and said, "Really? Is that true, John Mulaney?" And I was just like, oh, that's tough. That is tough. So these stories that we see, they're not the same for everybody.
No, there are some
Um,
people that leave and they don't feel like they have the same vibe as some of the other people once they've left. There's a difference.
yeah. But that's an interesting perspective too,
Yeah.
you know? And like we flat out did not hear from anybody who didn't have a long storied comfortable tenure, but like three people right off the top of my head, Luke Null, Jenny Slate, and Tim Robinson, would
Yeah.
have been fascinating to talk to. um I don't know, granted I don't know where those three would have fit in to the episode, like uh main ideas that they had arrived at,
Right.
but again, it's a piece of the puzzle, particularly for Jenny Slate and Tim Robinson, who saw like much better success
Yeah.
after they left. They actually did talk about somebody who experienced that, and it was Damon Wayans.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
he was fired, and what I was fascinated by, the piece where Al Franken was talking about that particular moment
Hmm.
where he was fired as soon as he walked off the stage during that particular episode. And when he said that the he had told another writer, one of the writers said, like, well, we'll never hear from him again, essentially. And Al Franken, this could be revisionist, we don't know, we weren't there,
Yeah.
but he said, like, I think he's gonna be fine. Um, and so the fact that, like, especially in that day, that they could recognize talent like that, but
Mhm.
even they, in their own admission in 1985, 1986, couldn't use it, or couldn't make it work.
Right, right.
Like,
It's
that's
just, yeah, it's that he's great, he just doesn't fit into this, what we're doing here.
right. Like, Eddie Murphy warned him, like, they
Yeah.
won't know how to write for a black actor unless you're in a background supporting role or something very stereotypical.
Mhm.
Um, and that ended up coming true. And then, like I said, it seemed like even Al Franken knew that that was a shortfall of the show at the time.
Yeah.
So just very interesting, like, layers to this, because you expect when someone leaves the show or gets fired like that, when, like, they weren't getting the time, they weren't the right fit for that particular, like, writing staff,
Mhm.
it wouldn't be a far fetch to just go, like, well, he couldn't hack it.
Right. Yeah, you put it on
And
them and
right.
not as much on the show at that point in time. Because
Hmm.
if you look at Tim Robinson, sketch wasn't his issue.
Right.
Because I would say that's what he's known for now.
Hmm.
I mean, that's what I think you should leave. It's sketch comedy. It just SNL wasn't the place for his specific type of sketch comedy.
Hmm.
But I mean, it wasn't. I don't remember when he left, and I don't remember how long it took between that and I think you should leave. But I don't think it was that long.
So he was only on the show in season 38. That was 2012, 2013. And then I think you should leave
I
came
believe
out
he was a
in.
writer for a season before that, also, wasn't he? You know what? Did he go back to writing? Did he not leave the show, but did he just go back to being a writer, maybe?
See, my understanding was all this time was that he had been removed. But let me check this list of SNL writers. Okay, so he is credited as a writer. He is not credited as a writer in season 38, which was when he was on
I
the
think he did.
cast.
I think he did the opposite of what most people
The
do.
inverse Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah, I think he was on the cast and it wasn't for him, and then he switched to just writing for a few more
Huh.
seasons.
How about that?
Well,
And that is a blind spot for me. I actually didn't know. So he leaves SNL for reals in season 41.
hmm
So yeah, what was he up to after that?
he did a show with um Sam Richardson. Looks like
Was
right
it Detroiters?
after, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Looks like right
So
after
there's
he left.
his trajectory.
And then he did. I think you should leave.
And then
Yeah.
I think you should leave, and Sam Richardson is all over that too. Um, okay. See, I'm learning too. Um, I I really liked Tim Robinson on the show, but it was one of those things where at the time I was just like, well, SNL is the only way people get famous. Like, it's just SNL is
Right,
everything.
yeah.
Um, and so when he left, I was like, didn't work out.
There he goes, yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's very interesting. I wonder
I'm
if he
pitching
appeared.
I'm gonna pitch another episode of the series for them. For
Oh, the
whoever from
documentary.
SNL, yeah. I want to see one episode that's only about people that did one season on the show. I want to hear from
Mm.
all of them.
Oh, that
Because
would
some
be
of
really
them
fascinating.
are crazy successful now. Some of them never really heard from again.
Yeah,
But I think that'd be fun.
that would be really good because there's not many. Most
Right.
people at least did two.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty rare. It's one every few seasons that only does one true year there.
Hmm. Yeah, and that would give a if if we're following the format of this documentary, which is like, kind of talk about one thing as a jumping off point, but have
Hmm.
it give more context to the full history of the show, that would do it, because you're talking about these interspersing seasons where things were really breaking down or things were really on the rise,
Hmm.
and getting just a glimpse of that, yeah, would be super fascinating. It's a good idea.
I'll
I'll
pitch
write
it for the
somebody.
60th anniversary
Okay, sounds good.
when they
Melissa
do that
Villasenor.
docu-series. Yeah.
Okay, I know this algorithm, or your algorithm has brought this to you, Melissa Villasenor. Just write that down. The next time someone calls you about footage.
Right.
So because I don't think she was interviewed, right? Which is super weird.
No, I think they just showed her audition, but she wasn't. No, she didn't show up.
Huh. Melissa Villasenor, if you would like to be interviewed and get your story on the record, we're here. I think you noted it, and I talked about it too. The them watching their own clips,
Hmm.
their own audition footage. Um, Other than Bowen Yang, who
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
screamed and yelled and like rolled around on the floor during
right,
his, everybody like they hated it, right?
right,
Like they didn't like seeing that, but like what was cool was like it's the before and it's the after. It's like in that moment you literally don't know if it's going to work. If it does, it's going to change your life. If not,
yeah,
you keep on grinding. And then the after of like, yeah, what happened here, however you feel about it now, worked out.
right.
And I mean, even I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to I don't know if I want to watch people watch them.
I was a little bit like, should I fast forward through these parts?
Because I was like, is it going to make me cringe too bad?
Right, right. And I thought it was really nice. I mean, it's tough. I think I didn't find it really cringy because a lot of the footage that we saw is stuff that made it onto the show. So I was like,
Right.
oh, there's that character. There's them doing that impression, So for me, I was just felt like I was watching, what happened leading up to whatever sketch they did that in. But for them, I
Hmm.
understand that that was probably tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, and a fascinating note that like every character, Michael Shoemaker said every character that Kristen Wiig did in her audition
Yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
became a sketch. I'm sure that's rare too.
Yeah, for every single one of them. Yeah.
Right. Um, but you know it, and again, this is a Las Culturistas podcast just as much as it's an SNL podcast. But something they talked about a few times, maybe last year, maybe in
Hmm.
2023, really like hit me as someone with a lot of shame for what I do and a lot of self criticism. I know if you're watching right now, it doesn't seem like it. I'm kidding. Um, they're like, the things you say now you're gonna have self criticism. What they have talked about before is so true, and what they call it is like summiting cringe mountain.
Hmm.
You have to do so much as like a comedy performer, and I'm not speaking from experience. I'm just like paraphrasing what they were saying. You have to do so much as like a comedy performer, a singer, whatever, that is going to be uncomfortable and
Hmm.
makes you think like I shouldn't be doing this. I don't know where this is leading necessarily. And that moment even includes the SNL audition for these
Yeah.
people. Amy Poehler couldn't watch the rest of hers. She's
Yeah.
like, I'm
Yeah.
good. I got it.
That's enough.
Um, but it has to be done. You have to be okay with cringe. You have to be okay with failing if the good things happen. And so it only
Hmm.
happens once you get to the top, thus summiting Cringe Mountain. And so I think like eh, the fact that that really never stops, you're always going to look back at something and be like, I wouldn't have done it that way, because we're learning
Right.
every day, like as people. And I feel like this goes for like even beyond like sketch performing, because like most of us don't know what that's like. Um, but it is something really important to remember that like we're always changing, we're always growing. You might as well just do what you think works right now.
Right.
Um, and I don't know, it's just a very fascinating. It was yet another layer to this whole like split screen of it all, of people watching their old auditions.
I was really, it made me, obviously, I was already emotionally on the edge from
Hmm.
minute one of the documentary, but it did
Hmm.
make me emotional just seeing them all have like that appreciation for like their younger selves,
Yeah.
and it was very sweet. It was just nice to see. And it was a nice twist on, because I feel like usually in the past when we see audition stuff, you just see, here's a bunch of auditions.
Hmm.
So to have them actually watch their auditions was like a
Hmm.
nice added layer to what we've seen before.
Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, these were extended
Yeah.
clips, and like we really got to see what it's like and just how dead it is in there, and
Hmm.
yeah, so fascinating. You wouldn't catch me dead in one of those auditions, but like very
Nightmare.
fascinating to watch. Oh my god, I couldn't even imagine.
I was very glad that they touch on it a little bit, but I was glad we didn't get the kind of like montage of like, can you believe that they auditioned and didn't get it?
Oh yeah.
They did like a handful, but I
Hmm.
remember during the 40th they did a very like extended like here's every famous person that auditioned for the show
Yeah.
and did not make it on. And I was a little concerned going in. I was like, well, I don't know if I want to watch all of that again. I've seen them
Hmm.
and they're fun, but like I know.
Hmm.
Like I know all of these people, didn't get on the show, whatever. But I was glad they kind of just only briefly touched on that, but it was more focused on the people on the actual like I guess audition process.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because like, and how it leads to working on the show. And I
Right.
think they did a good job of like drawing that line of like it starts here, it grows into this.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about people that didn't make it on, there is no other end to that line inside the show. There's
Hmm.
an end to that line outside, but if you're doing a documentary about SNL, like it's essentially pointless for
Yeah.
the history of the show. It's just like, oh, missed them, you know?
Right.
Oh
We didn't
well.
get well, I guess did we see Stephen Colbert watch his audition
We
or did
did.
he
We did
just
see a little bit of that.
he did watch it. He was maybe the only one.
Yeah, I think so.
But
Um,
I was also it was interesting to hear from the I guess you call them the talent acquisition side
yes.
of things.
Hmm.
I guess I didn't realize that like they were individually going out and finding these people and kind of like pitching them to Lauren sometimes, being
Hmm.
like, "Well, here's the four people I brought in."
Yeah.
And so then on top of hoping their person does well, if their person they picked didn't do well, you're trying to impress Lauren Michaels.
Hmm.
And then the people you picked didn't impress him. That must be like a tough
Probably a high,
feeling.
yeah, probably a high turnover position for sure. I wonder if
Yeah.
there's got to be like a scoreboard in somebody's office. Like,
Right.
I
Like,
got 10 people hired.
do you get a raise,
Yeah.
after your person has been on the show for, so many years?
Right. And then, the call-ins. One that they didn't mention who was like recommended from the outside. First of all, George Wendt recommending Jason Sudeikis.
Don't call
We
that a
talked about
recommendation.
that.
That's his nephew. That is not the same thing.
That doesn't count. Um, Megan Mullally
Mm-hmm.
recommended Bill Hader because like there was somebody that she was related to or that Nick Offerman was related to that and I don't remember where he told this story, but he told it somewhere. There
Mm-hmm.
was somebody that one of them was related to that had gone that was in a sketch group with Bill Hader. And what's ultra cold about this story is like she did not recommend the family friend. She recommended Bill
Yeah,
Hader.
that's super crazy. Can you imagine?
But I mean, when you see somebody like Bill Hader and he pulls out these impressions and these voices and Vinny Vedecci and stuff like that, it's like, yeah, I would too.
Yeah.
So the lore goes that Megan Mullally hosts in 2004. She recommends, like February 2004, she recommends Bill Hader. By the time the Topher Grace episode rolls around in 2005, he makes a visit to the studio, and then he auditions that summer and gets on. Crazy, just crazy. But to think about how the talent producers handle that, because I'm sure there's
Yeah.
phone rings every day with like
Right.
tips.
Yeah, some people, I'm sure, who was it? Somebody said like Gwyneth Paltrow recommended someone to them.
Oh yeah, who was that? Oh shoot.
It was probably to Lindsay Shookus, but
Yeah,
I can't remember who she said Gwyneth recommended. But I was like, why does Gwyneth Paltrow know that person?
right. Hold on. Gwyneth Paltrow SNL recommendation. Gwyneth Paltrow
Okay.
recommended Maya Rudolph.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
that's right. Um, yeah, where like these people, how do you get them in the same room and then they're
Yeah. Why does Gwyneth Paltrow know Maya Rudolph?
right? So wild.
Enough to
Um,
call the booker for SNL and be like,
hey, I
you
got
might
one
like
for
her.
you.
Well, I
Right.
don't know. I guess I don't know if it was Lindsay Shookus, and she probably wasn't the booker at that time, but
Yeah, but then to be, I think it was Marcy Klein.
oh yeah,
Because
okay,
she would have
that
been
makes
there
sense.
late
Yeah.
'90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, Lindsay
Um,
was there later.
she, yeah, and then just to have that, like, you try it and you're like, oh, they're gonna hate me for this, but damn it, like, I just saw this really good comedian, singer, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so I can imagine the like, hey, have you not to like do your job
Yeah.
for you, but like I saw someone that I think is really good, and
Right,
then
right.
you get like validated. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
turns out you had the right sense, Gwyneth Paltrow. Um, just wild. So Gwyneth Paltrow recommends Maya Rudolph, then hosts SNL and does a Gemini's twin sketch with Maya
Mm,
Rudolph. So it's like, wow, just full
full
circle
circle.
moments around
Yeah.
here. Yeah, it's such cool moments. If you're like an SNL history buff, God, I hope you've already seen the documentary because it is so
Uh-oh.
good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, spoilers, preemptive spoilers, but
For a documentary.
yeah, exactly. They are building to dramatic moments, so in a way, I
Right.
guess you're kind of spoiling. But um, oh man, well that was just episode one. I know we talked about some other things, but we may just have to do a light dusting of the
I
rest
was
of
gonna say, oops.
yeah, like woo. But that's how dense and cool this
Yeah,
documentary is.
yeah.
We could literally talk about it for as long as the documentary was. We could go 4 hours. We're not gonna. But but yeah. So and before we close out this segment, I'm reiterating my invitation to Melissa Villasenor. Okay, all right. So um, the writing, the
Hmm.
writing episode.
This one
Um,
was my favorite, I
you
think.
think so? Okay.
I think that this was my favorite one.
I it's tough for me to like pick an all-time favorite because like you they went so off the wall with the last two
Yeah.
that it was like, oh man, those were really interesting watches, but in terms of, you know what? This is no offense. This is why this is your favorite of the episodes because you did not see James Franco's film Saturday Night.
Yeah, maybe if you had sent it to me like you said you were going to, then
Did I not do that? Oh no, it's on me. See, this is another reason why we have to wrap up. Um, soon, like wrap up this episode soon, is like you have to have time to watch that
I
tonight.
do, yeah,
It's
I do.
assigned reading.
Hmm.
Um, it is structured very similarly to the James Franco documentary, with the
Hmm.
exception of like they cut in and have interviews with past writers to show how it was, and they kind of mirror those two storylines through it
Yeah.
all, which I thought was very interesting. But um, oh well, one thing I wanted to note is like imagine being somebody in on the floor or even in the audience for that Tina Fey episode, thinking like
Hmm.
I'll never see myself in here, and then you start watching this episode and it's like there I am.
There you are,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and then, like I said, all the alternate angles. It's just fascinating to me that they not only like showed the clips, but
Hmm.
took that approach to cut together the Tina Fey's first SNL monologue like a movie, like a
Yeah,
documentary. They didn't just stick with what was aired. They actually utilized all those extra angles, which I thought was really very interesting.
it
Um,
was.
and then, yeah, so not only like is the James Franco film very similar to this, there are shots in the Franco film that show up in this documentary. So this is another this double, triple layer, 5-layer dip
Yeah,
of like this James Franco documentary was formative.
yeah, yeah.
um,
To say that.
yeah, and then like Alan Zweibel talking about Gilda Radner
Hmm.
giving him the advice, and this is writing advice I've heard all the time, which is like just start
Yeah.
and you can edit later, but just get it down because right now you have nothing, it's very good advice, but the way that Gilda Radner put it was so wonderful. Where
Hmm.
she called it the vomit draft. You write down the vomit draft, you vomit out all the words, and you pick
Yeah.
out the corn, which is
Corn.
disgusting,
It's horrible.
but such a good illustration of
Yeah.
like you have to write so hard and so fast that you can't control what's coming out. But you can
Right.
find the treasure later on. This is disgusting. But oh, it's so good. And then the fact I have heard of Betsy Torres. I
Hmm.
had never actually seen her. I'd certainly never seen her talk.
Right.
But the fact that she has a director's chair in her office that says Betsy Torres,
Yeah.
that's so good.
Icon.
That is so good. And the fact that, like, I hope, and this is maybe a concern, I don't know if I should have, but, like, one thing that always struck me is that Will Ferrell, for just to use an example,
Hmm.
the idea of Will Ferrell being on SNL, he had huge fans in the crew. Like, my understanding was that he was just like a good guy to all
Yeah.
the teams, to everybody at that show. Like, definitely a vibe lifter.
Hmm.
And I know from working in production how quickly um, the walls between teams can go up and stay up, and there ends up being a lot of animosity um, towards other departments. Like, I work in post production. Edit and production is one of those like can be kind of a fraught relationship. And another one that I imagine is the case. I've never been on a show with like a full writing staff and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
is the animosity between writing and the rest of production, because the
Yeah.
stuff that you're asked to do
Right.
from this like 24-year-old kid
Yeah.
could make this seasoned Leo Yoshimura production designer
Hmm.
go, get the out of here. I'm not doing that. So Will Ferrell had that particular talent to where, like, when he goes off the air, the cue card teams are holding up, like, we'll miss you, Will. The
Yeah.
lighting department has built a light that goes on the back of the set and says, by Will on it. You get the sense that people rallied around this
Hmm.
guy, and there was like a very close relationship between him and the rest of the crew, whether it was a close personal relationship or they just liked the way he worked.
Right.
Was very interesting. But I didn't see much of that like cohesiveness when I saw the behind the scenes stuff, particularly when the writers visited these other departments.
Yeah.
It was more just like, hi.
Yeah.
But
It
what you
yeah.
expect when you see somebody like, I don't know if we saw Brian Tucker. I know we saw Jimmy Fowley
Mhm.
and Kira O'Sullivan go into like production design and whatever, and they haven't
Yeah.
been there as long. But you would imagine seeing tenured writers, they'd be like, Louis, what's up, man? How's it going? Good to see you. You feel like
Yeah.
it would be a little more casual, and it's not. And
Yeah.
I know from experience that those relationships get fraught fast. But to me, that was as much and as accurate of a look inside the production as anything. Just
Mhm.
the natural interaction. And I could be way off here. I just know from experience that those relationships department to department are really tough to keep positive.
Yeah, I don't know that I sensed like animosity, but yeah, it wasn't they didn't feel like they were, old friends or anything.
And I think that's what I'm getting at. It was less
Yeah.
animosity and more like these people do not know each other.
Right.
You know
Yeah,
what I
they're
mean?
not really like hanging out, shooting the like they're just these writers are walking up and, kind of hands behind their back going, "Hey, can you make me this for my sketch that might get cut?" The people being like, "Yeah, it's what I get paid to do."
Yep, I'll do it. Sure.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, it's just very interesting.
Mhm.
Like dynamic, I guess. The other thing that struck me was Tina Fey's attitude towards like she had that whole clip where she was talking about how things used to be,
Yeah.
where she was like, yeah, like I when I started here, like the rewrite room was terrifying. You would go in, you'd set your sketch down, you couldn't leave the room because then people were going to talk about it and people were going to say like kind of awful stuff.
Right.
And so I'm like, so then I'm thinking, okay, she's going to button this by saying like, those were rough times and like thank goodness it's not like that anymore. She ends it with like, maybe it should be that way again. I'm like, Tina,
Uh-oh.
wait a second. Does she think, what do you think that says anything about her opinion of the show?
I think that maybe that is just the way that Tina likes to write.
Maybe, and maybe she's better at most at not being super attached to what you write.
I love her. She's
Hmm.
my favorite person.
Hmm.
Like, I love her.
Yeah.
She's a little mean, and so I could see where,
Yeah.
like, her comedy, like, it's a little mean sometimes. So I
Yeah.
could see where she kind of thinks maybe that Current SNL is missing maybe it needs they need to, I don't know, be a little harsher with each other.
Hmm.
Who knows?
Huh. Interesting. Because up until now, I had really never seen her use like a negative
Right.
connotate. I've heard her talk negatively about people that have come through the show. There's a Howard Stern interview where she straight up calls Paris Hilton a piece of shit. Um, but like other than that, it was like the Las Culturistas interview where she's like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, I love that sketch. Who wrote that? She's great."
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And again, this isn't outright negative, but I'm what struck me is, does it speak to something that she thinks is legitimately missing from the show right now?
I am sure that I mean, I guess I'm not sure, but maybe in her mind that's the way to keep the writing sharp is to have people be a little more critical.
Yeah.
Maybe for her, because that's how it was when she was there, that's in her brain what she thinks makes good comedy, that
Hmm.
everybody is kind of a little ruthless about other people's writing.
Yeah. Because
But
ultimately, it's merit based. The best gets on.
right.
And if you are lenient about a sketch that maybe you're not super psyched about,
Yeah.
then it's that classic thing of like when I don't know that when somebody has a question and the teacher's like, seriously, ask any question.
Yeah,
Someone else may have the same one. Someone else could have the same concern about this particular sketch, about this particular line, and if you don't
right.
voice it, then you may not be getting the best product on the air. Yeah, so that kind of thing could be what she was speaking to.
And I guess, yeah, if that's the environment that was there when she was the head writer, then I
Hmm.
guess I'm not shocked that if that's how she operates, then of course she would think that, that's maybe the best way to do things or a good way to do things.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe she's right. I don't know.
Yeah,
It was an interesting take that she had.
yeah, for sure. And surprising. I mean,
Yeah,
the roller
yeah.
coaster ride I took from the first part of that soundbite to the
Hmm.
end was like, oh, it
Oh,
was a twist.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a very big twist. Um, and the only other thing, again, I have to like not dwell on this stuff, but like, the only other thing is that was very surprised that throughout this whole documentary we don't see Conan O'Brien. We see him one time
I had the exact
interviewing.
same thought in
Yeah,
during the writing episode. I was like, where is Conan? Like,
yeah. This is like his thing, his jam.
yeah.
Um, and the fact that it took so long to see John Mulaney.
Well, they open with Paula Pell, which, like, thank God.
Perfect.
I love her.
Me too.
But then I was like, yeah, surely it's Paula Pell, and then we see John Mulaney. If we're hitting like people who are well known as writers from the show, but have gone on to do other things
Hmm.
after that, but weren't cast. Conan is, I mean, yeah, he's like one of the people you think of that
Hmm.
fit that kind of description. I was surprised that he wasn't in that episode.
Yeah,
I kept waiting, but
I know.
he never
I was like, it's
never
gonna come
popped
sometime.
up.
He's not in that one at all. The only time he pops up at all is in footage from his show, his talk show in,
Hmm.
I want to say, maybe late 2020, but probably 2021, where he's interviewing Christopher Walken about Cowbell.
Right.
That's the only time we see him in the whole thing, which is very surprising.
Hmm.
But yeah, for this writing episode in particular, everyone they focused on just seems like a good hang, like a fun time.
I was so happy that Io's episode was the one that they picked. I
Yes.
don't know why. And I did look at who else hosted last season,
Hmm.
and there were a ton of former cast, so I'm a little bit surprised they didn't go with one of them.
Hmm.
But I mean, maybe they did want like a first time
Hmm.
host to kind of get the full effect of the writing process. But I mean, thank God it was Io.
Yeah, yeah, it was a good choice to make. I wonder if it just came down to like a timing thing where that's the one that
Probably.
they could do. Um, but yeah, it's such a fascinating, like, especially to follow along the entire way through with a sketch that ultimately gets cut.
I loved that. I
Yeah.
thought, because I started and I was like, I do not remember that.
Hmm.
And then as it went on, I was like, okay, this one's gonna get cut. And I thought that was
Hmm.
really interesting to kind of see that side of it and not just see like, here's how they wrote this super popular sketch that you remember.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was like,
Which they
here's all this
showed.
work that goes into this one that just didn't work. But we
Yeah.
did like take it almost all the way to the end.
And we have that, and because of that, we share that feeling with uh,
Yeah.
Jimmy Fowley and Kira O'Sullivan, who
Hmm.
worked on that. I mean, that set was huge. We saw all the prop
Yeah.
pieces and set pieces lined up in the
Yeah.
hallway after it was junked, um, and you feel that along with them
Hmm.
almost. But we do get glimpses at sketches that did really well. We
Right.
see Asha Ward talking about the brain like prosthetic and how
Yes.
she wanted it to be a little bit bigger, that kind of thing. Um, so we got some of those pieces, but ultimately, like I would say the focus of the entire thing ultimately doesn't make it. And
Right.
fun fact, the same thing happens in the James Franco
Oh,
documentary.
really?
one of the big focuses of that doesn't make it either. So, um, yeah, and so like I said, Asha Ward, I feel like is such a good time. She just seems like the coolest person.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing Please Don't Destroy work.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. What were you thinking about that?
I was just I really liked it because I guess I when I think of them, I don't think of them as writers first, but they
Mhm.
are. They
Mhm.
do write sketches. I kind of when I think of them, I think of them as cast, but only for their videos. But
Mhm.
I mean, they are almost every episode. Someone, when everybody goes on Instagram and tags everybody that wrote it,
Yeah.
they've got something on that they've written
Yeah.
with other people, and I just their dynamic is so fun. It was really cool to see them work, and that I think that their dynamic in real life does come through. Like they weren't super different from how they are when they do their short
I
films.
agree. Yeah, but what was interesting to me, and who knows if this is like um a regular thing or if it's something that just happened for this particular piece, but like Martin really took on like the producer
Hmm.
director role of the three of them, and like that could be something that remains, or that could be something that like doesn't really happen that often. We don't know.
Yeah.
But it was still like an interesting look. Like I wrote down like Martin kind of in that moment for that sketch was the Akiva to their Lonely Island, the one that was
Right.
really focused on like the delivery, the direction, that kind of thing. So again, we don't know. And I remembered one other thing I was going to talk about, unless you wanted to talk about that a bit more.
Oh no, it's fine.
So I was thinking one piece that I think was missing through this was the or what I would not missing, but what I would have liked to have seen. I would have liked just a little tidbit about like when writers end up on air, because it doesn't
Yeah.
happen often, but it does happen, and I'm sure for some for not everybody, because somebody like Jim Downey is on screen all the time through the
Hmm.
history, and even like John Mulaney now probably wouldn't remember much about like the little bit of screen time he would get. Colin Jost too, but like there are some writers who like they're not performers, they don't get on. It would have been interesting to talk to them about like, you know, what's your favorite on camera moment? Like where could people go see you
Yeah.
in action? Because people,
Why did you do that one? Like,
yeah,
did they ask you? Did you, all that?
because people are fascinated when they're like, oh, here's John Mulaney holding like a clapper in the Activia sketch, for
Right.
example. It's like these little Easter eggs that like would have been interesting to hear people
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, for when I was interning at the Late Show, I was in a graphic, and because of my very limited camera time, I was because like no camera time because I'm a goddamn intern. To me, that's a huge moment. Like I am the
Right.
plate,
Yeah.
I am the body of Brett Kavanaugh.
This is a House judiciary, not a House party.
It's not? Wow. Then why is Brett there with two kegs?
Swear to God. So, little moments like that where it's like, yeah, these are professional writers and actors and everything, but like they might still have those moments where it was like, oh my God, I got to like walk through and say something in a sketch with
Hmm.
Prince. I don't know, I wouldn't say it's missing. I would just say like that would have been fun.
Something that I think was missing, but maybe it's too, they didn't really touch on Update and how that all happens. And I know that's because it has its own writing staff. It's a
Mhm.
separate thing.
Yeah.
But I guess I was a little surprised since Colin and Michael, I don't know if they're both still head writers. I know that they were at one point.
Yeah, I don't believe they are
Um,
now.
but I thought it would have been interesting to kind of touch on that. But
Honestly, that is another contender for full episode.
yeah, I was gonna say maybe a weekend update whole episode.
Right. Because
Yeah.
it touches everything. It's the jumping off point for a lot of things. I mean,
Hmm.
to say nothing of the sketches, the full sketches that came from things that happen on Weekend Update or vice
Yeah.
versa. So,
Yeah.
Next time. We'll get him for the 60th.
60th,
Yeah.
I'm making a list.
We'll join the
I'll
panel.
mail it to Lorne
Right.
or whoever's running SNL for the 60th.
Could be him. Could be him. We'll see. Or it could not be here at all. If that happens, then whenever the show ends, we have pitches for that documentary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finally, we're at episode 3. Again, I'm trying to woo.
Yeah.
But the tone with this one was so much fun. Immediately, it struck me like, have you ever seen the Netflix documentary series, The Movies That Made Us?
I have, yes. Yeah.
It's very much like that, where it's silly. There's a bunch of graphics coming in. There's the insane video with Chad Smith as the lead singer, as Will Ferrell's character.
Yeah.
That goes back a long time. They have always said that they look like each other.
Right. They did that drum battle on
The Tonight Show. Yeah.
Tonight Show.
Yep.
Yes.
I just found that really interesting. And it struck such a similar tone between those kinds of extra things that they did, and then Daryl Hammond's voiceover interacting with the interview subject. It was such a nice touch, and very interesting to do these 4 episodes with 4 different, I believe it was 4 different directors taking 4 very different tones with it.
Right.
Just made it fun to watch,
It was fun, yeah. I wasn't sure going into it what to expect, since it's I see that this episode is 45 minutes long or something, and it's about a 3-minute sketch. I was like, what is this gonna be? What?
Yeah.
And I was pleasantly surprised. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I think all 4 episodes were over an hour. Because every one of them played with a watch all of these ads and then enjoy your movie ad-free. That's how Peacock presented it to me.
I have Peacock Premium, so I don't watch ads.
Oh, please.
If there's one thing I'm gonna shell out the money for, it is Peacock without ads.
Yeah,
I'm on there every day.
Putting in the work. So anyway, loved the whole tone of it, but very quickly you realize why we can make a 1-hour episode of television about one sketch, and it's because they take you from the beginning of every aspect of it.
They say, what is a cowbell?
I'm surprised they didn't show us the history of recording studios.
Right.
We go back to the beginning. It's the whole thing starts with you can't have cowbell without Will Ferrell. Here's the story of Will Ferrell on SNL.
Yeah, I was a little shocked that they spent some time kind of on his origin.
Right.
I feel like maybe it's just people who deeply care about SNL, but I feel like I knew most of that, so I was kind of surprised that they included that in there. But
yeah, it's interesting, and I know we'll probably close with the point that you mentioned earlier, but the thing about who was this for? Who do you think most out of it? That topic to come.
Yeah.
It was very little. It was the little things that I found super interesting. The sketch was meant for Norm Macdonald. It was originally a wood block and not a cowbell. Died on the floor.
Will Ferrell changed his shirt between Dress and Air.
Yeah. It was called Recording Session, which now we all know it as More Cowbell. It just, I don't know. Oh, and talking about the archival footage, I just saw this on my notes, was the Foo Fighters, when they were doing that Creating Saturday Night Live series years ago, they did one about music on SNL, and the Foo Fighters talked about how they essentially pranked Christopher Walken into saying their name, Foo Fighters.
Yeah, that was a good walk-in.
Oh, thank you so much. And so we've heard that story told a couple of different times. We see the moment happen it's like they're shooting a Thursday promo and he turns around and goes like, so how do you, where's the stress? What do you want me to say? And Dave Grohl kind of going like, I think it should be on Fighters. And he like shrugs like, do what you want with that. Seeing that moment of like history.
Yeah,
that
was
is
fun.
music history.
Yeah.
Was like, whoa, my God. And that's when I think that's when it really, it hit me that like, they have everything that's ever recorded. You'll enjoy this. I just got a note from my watch that I'm in a loud environment. I guess I'm talking that loud where it's like
you're creating the environment.
even my watch is like, shut up. Yeah, so again, and the fact that like, from like you said, the history of the cowbell. We go visit a cowbell manufacturer, the actual manufacturer of the cowbell that's used in the sketch.
Right.
We talk to the Blue Oyster Cult and rip open a 40-year-old like argument that they've been having about who even played the cowbell in the first place.
Yeah.
So again, you look at this episode and you're like, we're going to spend an hour on one sketch, but it's like they found some storylines.
It worked. Yeah.
Yeah. That were unfinished.
Yes.
So yeah, absolutely loved all of that. Another super quick, stupid note is that when they're interviewing Rachel Dratch, I believe she's in what we know as the rewrite room from episode 1. She's being interviewed in there, and she has a mug in front of her. It's a blue mug that has yellow text on it. What that mug says is 6 in a row, never again. And that mug was given to everybody involved with the COVID season, the first 6 episodes of season 46. That was when Lorne Michaels was like, we're going to come back on October 3rd, and we're not going off the air until the election's decided. And it resulted in 6 live shows straight. So I have one of my friends was interning at the time, and she has one of those mugs. So
nice.
that's,
you should have borrowed
just a
it.
little piece of history. Yeah, it's right here. Yeah. Yeah. What else are we? Oh, another just like, and again, stop me if I'm talking too much, Caroline, because trust me, I edit this show, and I know I talk too much.
No, it's fine.
I'm here to apologize formally for that.
I wanted to bring up, I thought it was really interesting that I don't know if this is just the way it came across, but Christopher Walken doesn't seem to be, I would say, thrilled with like the legacy of the sketch. Him not getting interviewed was a little surprising to me that they couldn't get him to do a little bit. And I don't know. I know Will Ferrell mentions that at one point Christopher Walken says that he, ruined his career or something, and I'm sure he was joking.
Yeah.
But also, I kind of feel like Christopher Walken is probably a little sick of the cowbells.
Sure. Well, it surprised us that they didn't get Christopher Walken. It did not surprise Beth McCarthy Miller. She was like, that doesn't... No. She was like, no, there's no way he's being interviewed for this. I love Beth McCarthy Miller so much. Beth McCarthy Miller, your algorithm has placed this episode in your feed for a reason. We would like to interview you anytime. Thank you. So what was I saying? To me, this is very similar to how Tom Hanks feels about David S. Pumpkins.
Yeah.
He doesn't get it. And he was interviewed after the fact, and he was like, people are saying this to me now, like it's a Halloween costume.
Right.
And I don't know how to tell them that I don't care.
Yeah. This isn't something that I love that I did. It's just something that I did.
It's just something that I did that like somebody was like, hey, do this. And I was like, sure.
Yeah.
I'm actually interested to see how old Tom Hanks was at the time of David S. Pumpkins. He was 60. And Christopher Walken, at the time of Cowbell, was 57. So that probably speaks more than anything to like their thought process and their relationship to it.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, this isn't for me.
They probably
You know?
just don't understand like why that's the one that clicked with everybody, you know? They're like, I don't know
'Cause
why that was the one.
Yeah, because humor is a very like generational thing. I'm sure Christopher Walken thought it was a fun, fine sketch,
Right.
but like didn't get exactly why it was that and why he's still hearing about it, you
Right,
know?
why people bring cowbells to his plays and have him sign them. Like, I understand that probably is really annoying
Yeah.
from a sketch that aired, almost 25 years ago. Like,
Yeah. Oh, one more thing that I think spoke across the whole entire thing is like when they interviewed people from their particular departments, for
mhm.
example, you can see it struck me when Leo talked about the crooked light in the back of the studio during Cowbell.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, man, not something I ever would have noticed, but it really speaks to not just in the scope of this show, but like people with an expertise in general.
Mhm.
It's so fascinating to hear what stands out to them. Like the
Right.
fact that the first thing he sees when he watches Cowbell is the crooked light is fascinating to me
Yeah.
because I think there's very few people in the world who may have even known that that light was crooked.
Mhm.
But that's not a bad thing. It's an attention to detail that's only possible if you've been doing this for literally 50 years.
Right. It just comes with the experience, with the tenure.
Yep, and the same thing about like Beth McCarthy Miller, like she's watching the sketch, they fade up on it and she's like, "Oh, yeah, we put that film grain over
Yeah.
the entire thing." That's not the first thing people would see. But
Yeah.
something that she would absolutely see because it's a technical challenge.
Mhm.
It's putting an effect like that over something that's live is way different than dropping it on in edit. So
Right.
like if you edited it, you might not even remember that moment of putting it on, but building that effect out and making the choice that like for the next 7 minutes our show has this film grain over it,
Mhm.
is something that would definitely stand out in your mind. So again, just these little moments of like um, we're seeing like how attentive these people are to their particular role.
Yeah.
And again, it happens with all professionals for sure, but it's just cool to see stuff like that. Oh, you put a note in here about the international
Oh,
versions of SNL.
yeah. I guess I just never knew. I don't know why I didn't know, but I didn't know that there were international versions of SNL I
Yeah.
think they showed France and Spain,
Mm-hmm.
and that not only was it, an international version of SNL, they were just doing SNL sketches.
I
They
think
just did Cowbell.
right, which
I
is
was like,
crazy.
"Oh."
I think that's the part that is that was most fascinating to
Yeah.
me. I had known they did international versions. There's also like an SNL Korea.
Mhm.
Um,
It makes sense to
yeah,
have just
for sure.
a sketch show
Yeah,
in
yeah,
another country, sure, but for them to just be like, "Well, everybody knows this SNL skit, so we'll do it in another
in
language."
French. Yeah,
It's like, "Okay, I
that did
guess."
that did kind of strike me. I was like, I don't think you can do that. I mean, certainly you can
Yeah.
because they did, but like, yeah, if I'm doing something like that, I wouldn't necessarily want to just restage what somebody else did.
Right. You
You know
would
what I mean?
yeah. Yeah.
Like, when I did Fake Jeopardy, and this is not on the same scale at all, but it's just like kind of similar things. I can make Christopher Walken stop staring at us. Sorry.
Oh.
Um, uh, when I did Fake Jeopardy on this channel years ago, um, I would do. Obviously, it is a ripoff of an existing program, but I was like, the only way this works and the only way this becomes mine is if I am writing all the clues. Me or people close to me, like we are writing original things.
Right. You're not just pulling existing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and people would ask me, especially if I was like running out of time to get a board done, they'd just be like, "Well, you can go find one." I'm like, "That's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm not making this Jeopardy game just to like make it. Like I want it to be a challenge, I want it to be fun, and I want to ultimately know at the end of the day this doesn't exist anywhere else."
Right.
So yeah, interesting that they would even want to do that. And
yeah.
we don't know the context either. It could have been like a 10th anniversary special or something. But yeah, just I found that very interesting.
It was an interesting little thing they kind of just glazed over.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, it was so popular. They did it in France. I was
It's
like,
global.
oh, they
Yeah.
did what?
They did what? Who
Go
did?
back.
Yeah. Yeah. Like me with Melissa Villaseñor's audition. Wait, hold that.
Wait, more on that.
Okay, so now we can talk about the big last one, season 11. I think we talked about it. We've covered most of these points, but like, so interesting to use the archival interviews, like the 2005. So in 2005, there was a standalone special about the 80s. It was called SNL in the 80s, Lost and Found.
Okay.
It was like a one-time, primetime special that came out in the span of like season 31. The interviews that you see when there's the title in the top of the screen that says recorded 2005 are from then. So, but what's interesting is that we get perspectives from people like Tom Davis, from people like Bernie Brillstein, who have passed away since then. So like Tom Davis and Al Franken were very close collaborators, and they are still telling this story together.
Yeah.
It's just Al Franken's version is 20 years after what we're hearing from Tom Davis. Just really, and then to form it all in this like Twilight Zone sort of look. Gosh, it was cool. It's a really cool episode.
It was fun. I did laugh that they used the 2005 footage of Lorne.
Yeah. He's still fine. He's still around.
Yeah,
but...
he's working. Like I know that they were like, hey, would you? He said, no, you have that footage. You can just.
I told this story already.
I already talked about it. Go use that. Go use the rest of it. Like diva behavior. I love him. He's so funny.
But it's perfect. It's so fun. It is funny because it's like he has told all of these stories so much that you could tell he's like, I'm sure that's laying around somewhere. Go look for it.
Right. Yeah. He's probably like, I'm sick of talking about this.
Yeah.
I just thought it was so funny that they used 2005 footage of him. He didn't show up. I mean, he wasn't in this at all.
Through the whole thing. Yeah. No. I mean, other than like when they were present at the during the writing episode.
Yeah, he didn't get interviewed.
No, he didn't sit down. Not once. Even James Franco got to sit down with Lorne Michaels. I mean, come on. Yeah, just little things. Like, I really want to see Terry Sweeney in a present day episode. I think he would really be a lot of fun.
Maybe during the special.
Maybe the 50th. Yeah. Because that's when Ellen Cleghorn had a really good moment that we've talked about before. Who I also think should get to come back around. Denitra Vance seemed like a very good time. Unfortunately, she has passed away too. She's been gone for over 30 years at this point. But I love that they were kind of a team. Like, I really got the sense that Terry Sweeney and Denitra Vance looked out for each other in a huge way.
I mean, I think if you look at those two versus the rest of the cast, I'm not surprised that they kind of like stuck together. Little
bonded.
Outsidery, I guess, in a cast that was supposedly all, outsiders.
Right.
But
to see even today Terry Sweeney celebrating the win that he felt was the George Wendt episode.
Yeah.
That he talked about, where it was like she got to do what she wanted to do in that episode. Like, that happens, of course. These people, they form close friendships, but in a season like season 11, in a case like Denitra Vance's, where she did not live very long after she was let go from the show, that one is very much untold, I would say.
Yeah.
So, gosh, just like every time that like Terry Sweeney would talk about not only him but talk about Denitra too, I was like, this is a cool moment that I don't think a lot of people would realize just how much that probably means to him.
Right.
Terry Sweeney, this episode has made it in your algorithm for a reason. Drop a line. Would love to talk about.
That would be so fun.
Oh my god, please. None of these interviews are going to happen, folks, but we can try. Let's see, what else? The Damon Wayans thing we talked about a little bit. That was so interesting. And then the fact that what I didn't realize was that he was asked to come. Did he host an episode, or did he just do stand-up?
No, I can't remember who was hosting that last one, but I think he just popped in and did like a quick 5.
Yeah. Huge moment, especially for like being let go in such
Angelica
you're right.
Houston.
Angelica Houston.
Oh, and Billy Martin. What a different world we live in. Can you imagine if they were like, oh yeah, the Yankees manager is going to come host? Be like, what? The manager?
I mean, never say never. George Steinbrenner will go on to host in 1991. We could see it again. I mean, look, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl in 3 weeks,
Andy Reid,
that would be hilarious. No, I think Travis Kelce comes back in the spring.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
If the Chiefs win again, and even if they don't, why not? But yeah, so that was. Yeah, but like him being asked to come back is like a huge moment for Lorne to be like, I might have done you wrong here.
Yeah, and I think I do like that about Lorne, is he does tend to pretty freely admit like that wasn't great. Like, well, I mean, like Shane Gillis, like he's on a record. I mean, like, yeah, I probably overreacted, which is why he had him come back and host. Right. But I do like that he is pretty like forgiving in that sense, quick to move on.
As intense as he is, and as much of a genius as he is, it would be different if he walked around like the king of the town, like he was never wrong.
Right.
But I feel like he does have those moments every now and then. I mean, some people would disagree. Luke Knoll would disagree.
Adrian Brody
would disagree. But he does have those moments where he's like, I had the wrong call here.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
So
I actually don't. I mean, and maybe he didn't have the wrong call with Damon Wayans.
Yeah, true.
But I think it was a nice like olive branch too, within the same season. Be like, well, I mean, you didn't fit here, but come back.
Yeah. It turns out I'm not as familiar with Mark McKinney's tenure as I thought.
I had no idea that he was a writer on the show.
Right, and well before he was actually in the cast. So I believe, if I'm getting the timeline right, he writes on SNL in 1985. Kids in the Hall comes out 88, 89-ish, ends in 1995. That's when he's picked up at SNL.
Interesting.
So it's a Dana Carvey show esque kind of thing, where like Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert do end up getting writing gigs after they were cast members on the Dana Carvey show once it was canceled. Very similar thing going on here.
Yeah.
They were not ever cast members, but they did. Steve Carell may not have. I know Stephen Colbert wrote for like a month.
Yeah, like a guest.
Yeah.
Writer spot. Yeah.
Similar to how like Michael Che came in, but Stephen Colbert leaves and does the Daily Show permanently. Michael Che left and did the Daily Show for 3 months, and then was given the call back to go to Weekend Update. So yeah, it's just interesting to see him in there. And I guess I assume he only wrote that 1 year. Is that covered in the documentary?
They don't really touch on how the writing staff changes, but I would assume that a lot of them, well, I don't know. I don't know if a lot of them left because the writers seem to be running the show, which I thought was like a pretty interesting dynamic.
Yes.
They kind of,
sure.
well, the whole thing where I don't remember who said it, but where they said like, well, the writers just wouldn't write for the cast. And I was like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah, how does that work?
then what are they doing?
Yeah.
They're just all writing for John Lovitz? Like,
Yeah.
I just thought that was such an interesting, like, to basically say that there was a hostile relationship between the writers and the cast. I was like, how does that work? Like,
Yeah, because there's
I don't know.
not that many people. If you say in a cast of 10, I'm not going to write for these 5 people,
Right.
you're running out of space quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very
super
interesting.
weird.
I don't know.
Super weird dynamic, but the weird year.
I mean, yeah, that's why it didn't really work out.
Yeah. And then something else so interesting. First of all, they got John Lithgow.
Yeah.
So that's how much Christopher Walken hates cowbell. They got John Lithgow, but
Right.
not Christopher Walken.
They got Tom Hanks too, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I feel like Tom Hanks would show up for SNL.
Yeah, yes, he loves SNL. But yeah, John Lithgow's not like he hasn't been like a lasting. He doesn't host every year, you know.
Yeah.
But
I think he could. I think he'd be great. But
oh, I love him. Yeah.
Something he said I really like sat with for a bit, which was like what his sense, having hosted episode 4 of this show, of this season, he felt that every cast member was trying to form their own identity, trying to make their own character, not in an SNL sense, but their own personality shine over trying to arrive at like a cohesive show.
It was a little
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
They were all just trying to be the star maybe, or like cater the show kind of like around them so that they stood out, but it doesn't work, I think, if you try to force it.
Yeah. Basically, how he said it was like they were focused on their own identity instead of working to create the identity of the show.
Right.
And that was really fascinating to me because what you see, if you follow that like train of logic, is that what you end up getting, if we're to take season 11 as like the jumping off point for the rest of the show, and everybody's trying to do their own thing, you're seeing in real time 10 forks in the road.
Yeah.
Of like, what if Anthony Michael Hall was the style they wanted going forward?
Right.
What if Terry Sweeney was the road they took? There's such a different show because then like the 80s and 90s became reliant on catchphrases and characters and stuff like that.
I mean, it was John Lovitz was like,
and it was
that's the road they picked. Like that was like Lauren was like, well, that's what I'm looking for right now.
Right. So does the ensuing era and then eras afterward look different if the catchphrases and the characters isn't immediately what they leaned into in 1986?
Right. Does the show survive?
Yeah.
Did John Lovitz save SNL?
I mean, that particular time, possibly. You can't say no. Obviously, like Eddie Murphy saved it in his day.
Right.
He was the only thing going for a long time. And you know, the fact that was the blueprint for these season 11 people. Like that was the immediately preceding era, save for this the season 10 hiring all celebrities time period. What they knew from at least the cast members that they could look up to that started at the show unknown was that there's only going to be one.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
might as well be me.
I'm gonna make sure it's me. I'm gonna, yeah.
Yeah. So, gosh, such an interesting dynamic in season 11. I get why they picked it now. I get
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
how much that story needed to be told and how it went on to affect the entire show.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask most people who were watching SNL at the time,
Mhm.
like if you were to ask them now, like maybe they don't pick it out as a memorable season because
Mhm.
it was so weird and rocky. You know, I'm sure a lot of people kind of just like forgot about it
Mhm.
and then focus on when it was like good later.
Right.
But I
Right.
think that if you're looking at what season of the show is like pivotal, I think it is that one. I think it is 11.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And another thing that we might have talked about before we actually started, that was the first time that Lorne Michaels, to use unfortunate imagery in terms of how season 11 ended, burned it all down
Right.
and rebuilt it.
Yeah.
That was the first time he said, we can roll this over and it can go on for future generations. This is not just a 1970s
Right.
show.
We can
But if
bring
you
this, yeah.
if you think about it, this was his first time doing that. He
Mhm.
built an entire cast in season 11 and he said, watch this, we can do it again in season 12 and find out, where we went
Yeah.
wrong and try it again. He didn't do that in the 70s. When everyone cleaned out in 1980, he left too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't his demonstration that this show could continue with different people and with people always leaving and coming on
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So in terms of what we would come to know
Yeah.
as SNL, which is like every year, who's it going to be or who are we losing, and have that be a
It's
routine of the show.
right. Yeah, it's not a shock when people leave and when they bring in
Yeah.
new people. It doesn't really shake things up too much
Hmm. Yeah.
in
But
just like
that
the foundation of
routine,
the show.
was established in season 11. So
Yeah.
yet another thing where it all comes back to that. Yeah, this was
Yeah.
such a good documentary series. I recommend it to anybody. But I mean, I guess we can close with this thought that you
Mhm.
raised, which
Yeah.
is, who's it for? Who do you
Yeah.
think it's for?
I was going back and forth because some of it I did feel like was pretty geared towards people like us that
Hmm.
have a kind of deeper knowledge of the show and kind of know some stuff going in. But then that's the lens that I watched it in, so,
Hmm.
I don't know if that's true or not. But then some things, like the cowbell thing, I think is kind of a broad, like, thing to any audience, but
Hmm.
you know this sketch, like, and then,
We do
here's an
this, we see
episode
this, we know
about it.
this.
Right. But then I don't know, the season 11 episode that's a little bit more, um, I don't know, it feels a little more specific.
Hmm.
Maybe your average viewer, I don't know. I guess I would love to know from them. Is it just people hopping onto Peacock and being like, "Oh, what's this? I'll watch it," and pressing
Hmm.
play, or is it people seeking it out because they just specifically want to know whatever they have to say about the show?
Yeah. I'm on the fence because
Yeah,
it's deep lore.
it is.
It's
Yeah,
there's some required reading before
yeah.
this. Like you kind of have to know who was on the show
Mhm.
at any particular time. It's like I'm trying to think of things that they barely covered the 70s. There's nothing about
There's no none of the original cast is in this. I don't
right.
think.
There's nothing that
Yeah.
would have been covered in the Saturday Night Movie, for example.
Right. Right.
Um, and so this cannot stand alone because it's not the full telling, but it does fill in those gaps in knowledge for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Um, even the people who have who are very familiar with the story of the show.
Yeah.
So, because it's big tentpole things that we don't cover. We don't cover the start of the show. We don't cover the end of season 5. We don't cover losing Chris Farley. We don't cover,
Right.
we do end up covering like Will Ferrell's tenure.
Mm-hmm.
We don't cover the show after 9/11. We don't cover any presidential election.
No.
So it isn't the full story, but it's the second layer.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have kind of a basic knowledge of the show,
Right.
then I think, I can't really decide who the intended audience is for this, and if they're aiming to get new fans out of it,
Yeah, it's interesting because if like a more passionate but same fan base ultimately does nothing for the survival of the show, not that this show's in any danger, but it's not lucrative. So I really do think this was like, I mean, just about every film and television person is like interested in the story of this show.
Yeah.
You could see it as sort of a passion project, and if I'm them and I'm setting out to like design this documentary, I'm thinking about, okay, what is something that we can show that couldn't just be shown from showing a bunch of clips.
Right.
Like, all of these, everything here was essential for every story told here, the person telling it was essential to the story.
Yeah. You
don't get the underlying things that were going on, particularly in season 11, just by watching it.
Right.
So yeah, I think this is definitely a second degree viewing experience. I think.
I think you're right. I don't think that somebody who, hasn't watched the show since the 90s is, maybe they're not gonna turn this on. Maybe they don't, maybe it's just for the people that are looking forward to the 50th special. Like, maybe it's just for that group. I don't know.
Yeah. But it's interesting because if you think like this is a very well talked about program. There are stories and documentaries and movies that you can find, and in the age of streaming, they all exist alongside each other.
Yeah.
So it's a very heads up aware move in the year of our Lord 2025 to say like, this has to be supplemental.
Yeah.
Because if people really did want to learn about politics on SNL, there's another option for them literally in the same app.
Yeah.
And then, just thinking about the idea of the 50th anniversary experience as a whole. The movie's part of that. The special coming up in February is part of that. These are now part of that.
Yeah.
And the show itself is becoming a part of that. So yeah, I think ultimately, like, even though maybe it's not for everybody, maybe you do need a little bit of background information, ultimately that's not a bad thing.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's available,
I wouldn't say that it would, like, scare off someone who, it's not too involved that you quit 20 minutes in and go, well, I don't know what they're talking about, so.
It helps that they're, with the auditions, they're talking to familiar people.
Yeah, they do start with like, these people, and then as you go farther down, it gets into maybe a little bit more obscure interviews.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Then you have Tom Hanks, so then it's like, well.
Right, and then Tom Hanks is back, and everybody claps.
You're like, oh, I know him.
Incredible documentary. I had a good time.
I loved it.
Anything else that we haven't hashed out yet?
We've hashed out.
We have hashed
a lot of it.
Yeah.
They should have interviewed us. We could do a
I'm telling you.
documentary about the documentary series.
Yeah. Where were you when you
Right.
saw Cowbell for the first time? Where were you when you realized you could do a Christopher Walken? But yeah, watch it, folks. Go find Peacock and watch it.
That's my media for this week.
That's also my media
The
for this week.
Peacock series.
Yeah. I wrote on our rundown for because obviously we do the in other media, and I was like, this is all I've watched for 2 weeks, so I ain't got no other media. I will have some eventually, but I don't right now.
I started Severance.
Oh my god!
Said I was
next
going
time.
to. I'm only halfway through it. No spoilers.
Okay, no, you're in for a treat. It's gonna be a blast. That's it. We did it. We talked about SNL
We did
50.
it. Yeah.
I'm sure I'm gonna sit straight up in bed tonight and go, I didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
It's fine. Trust me, folks. Just go watch it. You'll have a good time. And then the next thing coming up, talked about it earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, the 50 years of SNL music. I watched 3 separate interviews with Questlove today about it. It's gonna be good.
I'm
It's gonna be
excited.
really fun. They actually played a clip on the Tonight Show, and oh my god, Jimmy said the Tonight Show audience got to see the first 7 minutes, the opening act of this. And apparently, it's no interviews. It's just a montage of performances.
For 7 minutes?
For 7 minutes.
I love that.
So I'm very excited. Hope Questlove gets an Emmy out of it, because I can tell you already, it is an undertaking. He was approached to do this by Lorne Michaels. Lorne Michaels requested him to do this in April of 2021.
I mean, yeah, he probably needs that much time.
For sure. I mean, just to watch all the damn SNLs.
He watched 50 years of whole episodes, Yeah.
Yep. So that's going to be amazing. I think it's a 2-hour special, if I'm remembering correctly. So that comes out Monday. I don't know if we'll recap that standalone, because we will probably get another guest announcement during the Timothée Chalamet episode.
Fingers crossed.
If we don't, we'll just talk SNL music documentary, but that is kind of how I'm thinking this is going to go. So, oh, wow. Caroline, we did it. 2 hours and 1 minute, according to our clock here. So, yeah, anything for the road?
I don't think so. I would say watch the series, but I mean, it's kind of a given.
Kind of a given.
It'd be kind of insane after all of that. I went, you could skip it.
Yeah, it wasn't really necessary.
Take it or leave it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And just to review, Melissa Villaseñor, Beth McCarthy Miller, and Terry Sweeney have all received invitations to come talk it out with us.
Anybody else that wants to?
And anybody else, yeah.
Paula Pell.
Sure. Paula Pell. Oh, Paula Pell. Hello. But yeah. Well, Caroline, we've done it again.
We did it.
Thank you so much for joining me here. And we'll see you next time, folks, whenever that may be.